Hey, good evening and Happy New Year to you. Buon anno nuovo from me, Carl Munson, here in Portugal, and warming up for our live streaming that begins again in earnest tomorrow. Sorry, Ernest, for that. Good Morning Portugal show returns tomorrow morning, 8:30 Portugal time, and I'm just testing the new. Well, we've had a bit of a spring clean, wrong time of year, I know, but we've had a bit of a rejig in the studio to make it easier. Mrs. M was having all sorts of problems last year, as you may know if you're a regular and you watched the show. And I think I've sorted that out now, touching wood here, in a way that you can't see and perhaps should know little about. Dear, we've started as we mean to go on. Happy 2023 anyway. And testing 1, 2, 3. Oh, look, Chris, great to see you here. How are you? Oh, Minnie's here as well. Oh, good night, Madonna. Good. Oh, ouch. Good night. Minnie's birthday tomorrow. You're going to go and get a relatively early night. Look at 11:15. Look, you're making us look back. Go to bed. I'm going to have a nice day tomorrow for your birthday. There's Minnie. Okay, Chris, are we standing all right? 1, 2, 3. If you've tuned in and you're wondering what on earth is Carl talking about, Europe. Why Europe? Our wonderful continent, and Carl versus Wikipedia. What could possibly be more boring than a man reading from Wikipedia? So it may be that some insomniacs have tuned in who want to get to sleep. So I'm glad to serve whatever reason you're tuning in tonight. Whether you want to get to sleep after some serious partying over this festive period, do let us know what sort of holiday you've had. I hope you've had a good one. I hope you've had a fantastic Christmas or whatever way you've celebrated the holiday season. And wishing you all the best. For most people watching this will be observing the fact that it is now 2023, right? If you don't, tell me. I'm very interested to know how you're going to go about this next set of hours, days, weeks, and months. But presumably, most people watching will be in line with the calendar that says it's now 2023. Mrs. M, can I help?
Your sound, I think, is coming from the computer and not through.
Oh, is that why it sounds terrible? That was the one thing I didn't test. So thank you very much.
And that's what happened to me a couple of days ago.
Very good. All right, thank you very much for that. You're absolutely right. That's why it does sound hollow. And now it's going to sound amazing. Yeah. There you go. How about that? So pretend you haven't heard the first 3 minutes of that. Chris, although you say it sounds okay, perhaps a little hollow. That should be a whole lot better now. I've got a big bottom on, which is one of the microphone settings, I think, if I have a quick look at that. Yeah, I think that should be good now. Audio processing. I've got my oral exciter on. Who doesn't like an oral exciter first thing in the morning? As well as a big bottom. I've got my processing switched on. DS and noise gate is not on. I'll try that for a little while and see if that helps as well. Perfect, says Chris. Yeah, I don't like the noise gate. It cuts. It's a bit too keen for my liking, so we'll do without that. And OLP, hello to you. Hi, Carl and Louisa. Happy New Year. So I'm going to start reading from Wikipedia, which I'm hoping is going to be more interesting than it sounds so far. Mrs. M, thank you for that technical touch there, Mrs. M. Sounds perfect. We all love big bottoms and oral exciters, don't we just? Okay, so let's get that Wikipedia screen onto the screen for you to see as well. And I'll give you a bit of context, bit of background, because it all started with, look, please, Stephen, don't be doing that, okay? Can you hear me at the back? And Merry New Year. Owen's joined as well. Thank you so much. Do you know what? This might have been a very good time to go live, mightn't it? Because people are just kind of easing their way into the new year. So I think some serious partying has gone on. But whether you have been partying or not, I think some people are ready now to start 2023. Are you not? So just send any messages you have about how you're going to be attacking, approaching, treating, tickling the new year. And we'll do our best to include all the comments interwoven into the European commentary. Now, as strange as it may sound, this goes back to the Qatar World Cup. And of course, you know, Uncle Frank, who was quite keen to point out that a lot of the criticism of Qatar, though perhaps well-founded on some accounts, could not have been said that eloquently or elegantly from people who themselves live in glass houses and should be careful how they throw stones. So hypocrisy was on the table, certainly with the World Cup. And Frank made that very clear to me. And I had some very interesting conversations with Frank, which I'm very grateful for. And it made me think, strangely enough, I don't know what exactly why, it made me think about Europe and our place in Europe, and um, how East meets West, how we are over here in what I think is the best country, or certainly one of the best countries in Europe, Western Europe, and it's Portugal. And I began to think about the Middle East, obviously with Qatar, the Middle East, and where Europe meets the Middle East. And Frank was doing a bit of traveling and was reporting his his good times that he was having basically in the Middle East and the east of Europe. Or towards the eastern frontier, if you like, or on the other side of the eastern frontier, in fact. So all of this was in my mind, and I had this realization, and this I don't know if Chris is still here and wants at this time of the evening to be drawn into possible European controversy. But I've got to say, Chris, something that really shook me, and it's over on my new. We've started some Google groups for Good Morning Portugal and for the new Good Morning Europe phone in, which is the arse end of the morning show from 9:30 now. We will have a European phone-in, inviting people to call in from all over Europe. Of course, the Gumpers and our friends and community in Portugal. But I wanted to widen the scope this year to include people all over Europe in that last half hour of the show, and see how it works, see if anyone's interested or not. And the big realization, if I may read from the Gumper group where I've posted this, and I'll also put the link so that you can go there yourself if you want to carry on discussing this after the show tonight, if you haven't fallen asleep with me reading from Wikipedia. I begin by saying, guess what? The EU is not Europe. Having been raised in Western Europe and under the flag and propaganda of the European Union and Common Market, it was no wonder I'd been conditioned into thinking Europe was just those 27 member states, slowly homogenizing themselves into a political and economic corporation. I've seen the concept of free movement come and sovereign currencies go in my time. I've also seen Brexit create havoc as a proxy for the further political and economic machinations. None of this, despite the strong feelings stirred and emotional damage caused, is anything to do with true or real Europe, a continent, some say a peninsula, of mind-blowing cultural diversity. And that's what I hope to do tonight, is introduce you to maybe change your view of Europe as well, or see if you have had a similar conditioning and it makes you think it's only the 27 member states and a pretty homogenized grouping at that, fast becoming a corporation. It's a continent, some say a peninsula, of mind-blowing cultural diversity and human innovation. Strangely enough, I continue in this entry on our Google group. The Qatar World Cup helped shift and broaden my mind, with hypocrisy and double standards awash in the peri-football conversation. When looking at someone else's garden, stones in hand, it's always good to take a look at your own glazed arrangement, i.e. you shouldn't throw stones if you live in a glass house, right? So I did, and I continue to, and whilst living on its western edge, in what I think is one of its best nations, i.e. Portugal, I'm also falling in love with the host continent as I discover what's been hidden from my view by my own prejudices, and I'll own this, my own prejudices and concepts. I mean, you can be conditioned, but you don't have to run with it, do you? And notably catalyzed by the corporate arrogance of cultural supremacy, political agendas, and vested economic interests. So I think there's something going on here with the member states of the EU and the propaganda that goes with it. Whether it's purposeful or not, I don't know, but you certainly can get a view of the others, the othering of the other countries outside the 27 chosen few. Europe borrowed its dominant religion, of course, from the East, that it now tends to project its fears upon. That's something I'm happy to own. I have prejudices and strange views about Eastern Europe that I know are automatic and not very well considered or intelligent. And all of this that I'm sharing with you tonight is all part of the scales falling from my eyes, if you like, or my changed perspective on the matter. Europe has been, I continue, as a culture, the most amazing gift to humanity, despite a current and fashionable shame and self-doubt to which I myself have been partial. There's a lot of that about in the world, isn't there? It is definitely not all good, but it is most certainly not all bad, and it is much more than the EU. And I can't wait to find out more. And I'm going to take you on that journey with me tonight. Okay, let's just catch up a little bit and see if anyone is sharing their love of Europe or just wanting to say Happy New Year. And great news from the OLP. Is this still the right button? Yes! 2023 coming to Portugal. What? Good evening to you, OLP. Thank you for being here tonight. And boa noite, gumperas, or because it's the evening, Geperos. Does that sound any better? I don't know. Good evening, all, from Fiona and Simon. Simon, probably. Hello to you, mate. And thank you for your support, your kind words that have been peppered across the community during the shutdown. Evening, Chris, Louisa, Raphael, Fiona, and Simon from Stephen. And Chris says, I think I've piqued his interest tonight. Never seen the 27 states as the whole of Europe. However, freedom of movement is a human right, not depicted by leaders of the world, but by us as humans. Well said, Chris. So, okay, you haven't had that same. Calling it a prejudice, I suppose, is a little bit strong, but that conditioning, I can't help but have in my mind Europe as being in some way synonymous with that blue flag with the yellow stars on it. Now, may I just share with you some of the produce that I'm enjoying from Europe this evening? This is a budget wine, just incidentally, and we will be tasting Beirao tomorrow night, their Honra Saint-Anoche, their 100-year anniversary brew that they brought out, I think, last year or the year before. That is the wine club's wine tomorrow night. It's not really a wine. It's a liqueur, and we'll be talking about that and tasting it tomorrow night if you want to try and grab one of those. Or just bring your favorite brew tomorrow. But tonight for me, it is a Dow. It is in the budget section, and I'm just testing it tonight so that others might not have to or might like to. It's the Reserva. So although it's on the bottom shelf and it's quite cheap, but I think at about €3, it is a DOC from the Dow. Dow does divide people. It's got a gold label on it, which is always helps me with my buying process. When I first tasted it yesterday, it did taste a little bit industrial, I've got to say, but I'll see if that's improved as I quaff upon it tonight, including a fly that went in there overnight, I think, before I managed to get the cork in. I shall be quaffing on this evening as we continue our journey into looking at Europe, as depicted by Wikipedia, which is the reference point I'll be using tonight. But I like that, Chris. Freedom of movement is a human right, not depicted by leaders of the world, but by us as humans. Yeah, try telling that to passport control. Okay, let's have a look then at. Let's start reading our way through Wikipedia this evening. Let me just ask you a couple of questions. How many people do you think live in Europe? How many sovereign states do you think it has? What else was I going to ask you? Oh, yeah, and in the ranking of continents, where do you think it is? If we go with a 7-continent index, where is Europe in that ranking? Is it the largest or the smallest? Is what I'm getting at. Talk about narrow-minded. The United States of America thinks it's the only country. Yeah, some Americans do, don't they? I think it's fair to say, or brought up that way. Again, it's the conditioning, isn't it? You know, and you can't blame people in many ways for falling prey to their conditioning. But I guess you can challenge them if they've not taken a second look to maybe question everything. That's the phrase that's going around at the moment, isn't it? I guess it comes from not questioning anything. Where the problems can begin. But we do have to inherit some information from our culture and from our parents, don't we? And that's not always the best information, it has to be said. What happens if I do this? That's a better view, isn't it? That's less of me, I think, just about, and more of Wikipedia there. So I'll do my best to interject Wikipedia with some fun. Let's see how that goes. Europe is a large peninsula then. So we call it a continent, don't we? It's one of the great continents of the world, but it is actually a peninsula, conventionally considered a continent in its own right because of its great physical size and the weight of its history and tradition. So that's, if you are a peninsula and you want to be considered a continent, then you should think about developing your physical size and the weight of your history and traditions. Europe is also considered a subcontinent of Eurasia, and it is not to be confused with the 80s pop band. Europe is also considered a subcontinent of Eurasia, and not Eurasia, and it is located entirely in the northern hemisphere. So that's your first cool factoid, isn't it? And mostly in the eastern hemisphere. But of course, these things are depictions, as Chris has said. These are made up, aren't they? These things, these self-referential points. It is interesting, I think, that we are in the northern hemisphere, with all that brings with it as well as Europeans of the European continent. But I didn't know it was mostly in the eastern hemisphere, and I'm not sure what difference that really makes, or what influence that might have. Comprising the westernmost peninsulas of Eurasia, it shares the continental landmass of Afro-Eurasia with both Africa and Asia. Not surprisingly, it is bordered by the Arctic Ocean to the north, the Atlantic Ocean to the west, where we live here, with the Mediterranean Sea to the south and Asia to the east. Europe is commonly considered to be separated from Asia by the watershed of the Ural Mountains and the Ural River, the Caspian Sea, the Greater Caucasus, the Black Sea, and the waterways of the Turkish Straits. And all of that is what sounds really interesting and exotic to me, and places I would like to visit. You know, as you're growing up in the UK, you go to France, you go to Spain, and you go to Germany, don't you? And I think, I don't know, Chris, we tend to see ourselves as Western European, don't we? And, you know, melanging in that melee of Western Europe. And that other stuff over there to the east is quite different. Would you not agree? Unless you go to the holiday resorts of those places over there in East. And incidentally, today, didn't Croatia become a member of the Schengen zone today? And I wonder how that went down in Croatia, with the cash machines converting to the euro. What was extra points if anyone could tell me what the Croatian currency is that is going out of date? I think they've got a little bit of a crossover, but let me know if you can. It's something like the kurga, but the Croatian currency, no more as of today, or being rapidly phased out as they now favor the euro over there. First country to join the Schengen zone for, I think I read, certainly over 10 years, interestingly, despite the aspirations of the high-ups in the Commission, I suspect, or the European project. Europe covers about 10.18 million kilometers square. That's 3.93 million square miles. And this, I think, is interesting. It's only 2% of the Earth's surface, 6.8% of land area, making it the second smallest continent. So there you go. There's the answer to the first one in terms of the 7-continent model. Europe is the second smallest continent, but it punches above its weight. I think you'll agree. Politically, Europe is divided into about 50 sovereign states. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? Wikipedia, about 50 sovereign states, of which Russia is the largest and most populous, spanning 39% of the continent. Isn't that amazing? So Russia, part of Europe, and spanning 39% of the continent and comprising 15% of its population. I mean, these numbers really make me think. Who'd have thought it? Europe had a total population of about 745 million, and that's only 10% of the world population in 2021, when everyone stood still enough to be counted. The European climate is largely affected by warm Atlantic currents that temper winters and summers on much of the continent, even at latitudes along which the climate in Asia and North America is severe. Further from the sea, seasonal differences are more noticeable than close to the coast. We know that from our experience here in Portugal. So European culture is the root of Western civilization. So some horn to be blown there, which traces its lineage back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. And this is something, as Europeans, we can be proud of, I think, or at least interested in. The kuna, not the kurga, the kuna. Thank you very much for that. A few more people have joined since I was reading Wikipedia. A few people have managed to stay awake as well, which is really good. Well done, everybody. Okay, Porto Seixo Reserve is great. We went to a party on Friday. I've never seen a bottle vanish so fast. It was the first time the guests had tasted it. They loved it. That's great. Porto Seixo. So the reserver of that, nice one. It's a good marketing move, isn't it? To when you're narrowing in on a bottle of wine, and it becomes a matter of, shall I get the basic or shall I get the reserver? They've got you, haven't they? And this is the reserver of the Dow that I mentioned earlier on. Let me just have a quick sip. Good nose on it. And that has not improved overnight, but it's okay. Right. So well done on the Porto Seixo. If the producers of Porto Seixo are watching, send us a crate and we'll try it live on the show. Not Americans necessarily, but the media and the politicians. Yeah, fair enough, OLP. Yes, that is to say what the government and the ruling elite of America certainly have an inward and navel-gazing view, perhaps. But then again, it has been America's business to export democracy around the world, so they are quite outward-looking as well over the last few decades, right? Happy New Year, mate. Happy New Year to you. That picture of the lovely Eve Lee. She's a heartbreakingly beautiful little lass, isn't she? Wonderful picture. of Eve. So gorgeous, lovely, lovely portraits. I don't know who managed to capture that. Probably you, Lee. You're a bit of a keen photographer. So happy New Year to you, my friend. Won't see you tomorrow night for the gardening Q&A. We will see you a week tomorrow. For the first gardening Q&A of 2023. Thanks for all you do, Mr. McGrady, head gardener McGrady. Bye, Andy. Bonoiti. Happy New Year. All interesting stuff. Thank you, Andy. A validation of my efforts tonight to look at the big picture, our wonderful continent of Europe, wherein we live as citizens of or residents of Portugal. Oh, went very well in Porto. I did my Brexit documents. Everything's already updated online. It's Registo and not Seth that are doing it, and hence why I think it's going so well. And all I need to do is pay for it now, and it'll be sent in the post. Fantastic. So yes, the kuna for Croatia. Maybe get your kunas, your big kunas, and put them to one side because they will be collector's items. Now the euro there in says OLP in Croatia, of course. And a happy New Year, Lee McGrady from Chris. In Croatia, a kuna is an indigenous weasel-like animal, or rather like the British or English marten, pine marten, whose pelt Croats used as payment in medieval times. Fantastic. The word lipa means linden tree. One kuna is divided into 100 lipas. Well, it was. That's all about to change, isn't it? OLP, always been amazed. Thank you for that, Simon. Always been amazed that Turkey is in both Europe and Asia. Very interesting country from what I read. Live on a visit. I think love to visit, maybe. You and me both, OLP. Suze is here. Happy New Year to you. Bomana over to you. Suze and Taxi. Oh, and a Happy New Year all. Look, she's appearing twice on Facebook and the YouTube as well. Fantastic. I thought the first week of the month, no gardening show. Absolutely. So no gardening show tomorrow. We will see Lee in a week's time. We have our meeting tomorrow with John and Anna. Okay, let's carry on then, reading this Wikipedia information about Europe. And thank you, Andy. Yes, I think it's interesting stuff. So European culture is the root of Western civilization, according to Wikipedia, which traces its lineage back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome. The fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, and the subsequent migration period marked the end of Europe's ancient history. Okay, so near enough 500 years into the AD period, and that ended Europe's ancient history, and thus began the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, humanism, exploration, art, and science led to the modern era. So since the Age of Discovery, started by Portugal and Spain, yes, there you go, Europe played a predominant role in global affairs between this tiny country here, Portugal, 10 million people now. How many in the Age of Discovery? Far fewer. Both Portugal and Spain then playing a predominant role in global affairs between the 16th and 20th centuries. European powers colonized at various times the Americas, almost all of Africa and Oceania, and the majority of Asia. I was with some Filipinos last night telling me about the amount of visitors they've had over the years. Of course, the Philippines named after King Philip of Spain, right? Isn't that amazing? And colonized, they said, I don't know officially or unofficially, but by the United States since the 1930s. Was the estimate of there are Filipino kids who speak only American English now in the Philippines for a couple of generations, or probably more. In fact, fascinating to find out about the Philippines, its languages, and the amount of islands there are in the Philippines. Last night with my Filipino hosts last night. Celebrating New Year here. It was amazing in San Martino de Porto. The fireworks were out of this world. So powerful, in fact, they were literally almost out of this world. The noise levels were. Okay, so the Age of Enlightenment and subsequent French Revolution, that flash of a communist Russian flag there was not a bit of a subliminal advertising. It just came up when I ran my mouse over something. So I'm not messing with your mind there. The Age of Enlightenment, the subsequent French Revolution, and the Napoleonic Wars shaped the continent culturally, politically, and economically from the end of the 17th century and the first half of the 19th century. And I certainly want to find out more about Napoleon's impact on Portugal and Spain. which I think is significant. Certainly for that village that buried all its wine, thinking that the Napoleonic troops were going to pillage their wine stores, they buried it underground. And they still do it to this day because they figured that it added something to the wine. That's up there in the north of Portugal. The Industrial Revolution, which began in Great Britain at the end of the 18th century, gave rise to radical economic, cultural, and social change in Western Europe. So it's somewhat poignant, isn't it, given that Brexit has happened in these last few years, considering the impact that Great Britain had through the Industrial Revolution, through Western Europe, and thereupon the whole world, in fact. Cultural and social change in Western Europe, and eventually the wider world. Both world wars took place for the most part in Europe, contributing to a decline in Western European dominance in world affairs by the mid-20th century as the Soviet Union and United States took prominence. Now, I've been talking about the fourth turning, have I not? And I know some of you have watched that video where we discussed it. John Heimbach and I discussed it. And it's the period after the two world wars that gave rise. That was the last fourth turning, giving rise to a post-war high. We might be in similar territory if that, it's not exactly a prophecy, but if that research and theory is true. So isn't it interesting to note that Europe's power waned and gave way to the Soviet Union and the United States as world players after the Second World War? What on earth is going to be happening this year and in subsequent years, I wonder? During the Cold War, Europe was divided along the Iron Curtain between NATO in the West and the Warsaw Pact in the East until the revolutions of 1989, when my eldest daughter was born. I mean, it's so fascinating to think that in her time, she won't know of that. I grew up with the Iron Curtain. She'll know nothing of it, having been born in 1989, the year of her birth, seeing the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Don't worry, folks. I'm not going to read all 14 sections of Wikipedia. I'm just going to take you tonight by way of a bit of a warm-up ahead of tomorrow's show, where we will begin with our traditional warm-up, meeting and greeting, pressing the flesh and saying hi to all the Gumpers in the first half hour from 8:30. From 9, special guest, always a special guest at 9, and that'll be James Holly with a bit of mindful migration. He'll stick with us as we open up the phones at 9:30 tomorrow for the first Euro phone-in tomorrow. Same number as usual, 00351, the Portugal code, 913-590-303. So where did we get to then? 1949 is where we got to. The Council of Europe was founded with the idea of unifying Europe. Did anyone get heavy at that point hearing about the Council of Europe? Thinking of Mrs. M for one. How's it going? Gumpers I'm going to go with there. That's not what she's written, but I'm going to translate that. I spoke with Jean, not Johnny in central Portugal, but Jean in Minnesota. She told me of a site called Rome to Rio. It tells train schedules, helpful in deciding where to live. 3 trains from San Martino to Lisbon daily, and the times. You know what, though, Suze? It's a very slow train. The coach that I took from San Martino to Porto the other morning was so impressive. If you live in San Martino de Porto, you really want to be looking at coaches rather than trains. They are slow and they stop at every station. Be aware of that. That's what first interested me as a teenager about Portugal, was that such a tiny country ruled the world. Yes! You went to a great school then, or was that your own research there, OLP, I wonder? And same to you. This is the New Year greetings that are circulating around the room. Thank you, everybody. Buon anno novo, prospero anno novo, felice anno novo to all this evening as we continue our journey through Wikipedia's entry on Europe to look at the big picture. We find ourselves in Portugal, on the continent of Europe, which is actually a peninsula, as we discovered earlier on. So in 1949, then, the Council of Europe was founded with the idea of unifying Europe to achieve common goals and to prevent future wars. Further European integration by some states led to the formation of the European Union, the EU, a separate political entity that lies between a confederation and federation. I am tempted to click on those. Okay, a confederation is a union of sovereign groups or states united for purposes of common action. A federation is a political entity characterized by a union of partially self-governing provinces. Don't feel that much better off. I glazed over a little bit on that deep dive into both of those. The EU originated in Western Europe, but is expanding eastward since the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. The currency of most countries of the European Union, the euro, is the most commonly used among Europeans, and the EU's Schengen area. Now, I want to find out what the Schengen area is, so I might take a little detour into that. The EU's Schengen area abolishes, I want to know why it's called the Schengen area. Is it because it was signed in Schengen? Schengen area abolishes border and immigration controls between most of its member states and some member states. Between most of its member states and some non-member states, there exists a political movement favoring the evolution of the European Union into a single federation encompassing much of the continent. So the United States of Europe, the European state, the European Federation or Federal Europe is the hypothetical scenario of the European integration leading to formation of sovereign superstate organized as a federation of the member countries of the European Union. Now, this is the wonderful thing, isn't it, about where ideology meets human nature and how that seems like such a great idea, doesn't it? How we can be sold such great things based on convenience and ideological coziness. But so often these things turn into, I was thinking about this earlier on as I was out walking the dogs, and I was thinking to myself, what is the, because I've been referring to it, haven't I, as a sort of corporation. I think to me the EU, whatever you believe its aims to be, it is a bit of an exclusive club, isn't it? It's a bit, at school, if you're at school and powerful people at school organize themselves in such a way that betters their chances and excludes other people, you call them bullies, don't you? But if it's countries that do that, you call them the EU. Maybe. I don't know. It was just what occurred to me when I was out walking the dog. Anyway, then let's have a look at the name of Europe and the contemporary definition and see how far we go into the history. Those Caucasus Mountains look immense, don't they? And you can see, can't you, from this map? And, it depends which projection you use. And actually, this one looks very different to the one we've got in our living room, which we bought from IKEA. And I don't know what the Swedes would have, what vested interest the Swedes would have in a certain kind of projection. But this one doesn't look especially accurate to me. But anyway, we'll come to that. So let's go back into the origins, because I think the origins of names, the etymology, can be really helpful, can't they? Big picture, deep dive, different angle. These things are really helpful when we get a little bit stuck in our ways and our thought forms. So Europa, then, the consort of Zeus. Now, that alone is a great story. Zeus disguises himself as a bull to come to the attention of Europa. And then as soon as she strokes him, he kind of responds in kind, encourages her to jump on his back and takes her to Crete, I think, just like that. Where she becomes his wife, and I think bears him 3 children. Be careful petting bulls in a field, however attractive they may seem, especially you, Europa. So let's find out a little bit more about Europa. In classical Greek mythology, Europa, ancient Greek, I can't pronounce that in ancient Greek. I don't even know why I read that bit. She was a Phoenician princess. One view is that her name derives from the ancient Greek elements, Urush, meaning wide and broad. That's not very polite, is it? And Gen, possibly eye, face, countenance, hence their composite. Europe would mean wide gazing or broad of aspect. Okay, that's not her as a woman, presumably, but her as a mindset, I hope. If you're coming to giving out names, you probably wouldn't call somebody broad of aspect, would you? Referring to them personally, more to do with their mindset. Anyway, I'll move on. Broad has been an epithet of Earth herself in the reconstructed Proto-Indian European religion and the poetry devoted to it. An alternative view is that of Robert Beeks, who has argued in favor of pre-Indo-European origin for the name. See, we live in Europe, and the jury's out on how it got to have its name. Isn't this amazing that us humans, 745 million of us living on this continent, don't really know where the name came from? Doesn't that boggle your mind? It does mine. I'm going to have a lie down soon. Explaining that a derivation from Eurus would yield a different toponym than Europa. Beeks has located toponyms related I don't know. Who knows what a toponym is? That's not in blue, so I can't look it up quickly. Related to that of Europa, in the territory of ancient Greece and localities. Oh, the names of places, toponyms. It must be, mustn't it? Topology, name, yes. And localities such as that of Europos and in ancient Macedonia. Suffice to say, people don't know why Europe is called Europe. There have been attempts to connect Europe to a Semitic term for West, this being either Akkadian, Erebu, meaning to go down, said of the sun. Oh, to go down and set like the sun, or Phoenician, Arab, evening, west, which is the origin of the Arabic. I think we're going a bit specialist now, aren't we? People will be dropping off now. My pleasure if you are an insomniac and you're finding this helpful. So Martin Litchfield West, the other great, yes, the Robert Beeks and the Martin Litchfield West stated that phonologically, the match between Europa's name and any form of the Semitic word is very poor, while Beeks considers a connection to Semitic languages improbable. You see, they don't know. Most major world languages use words derived from Europe or Europa to refer to the to the continent. Chinese, interestingly, for example, use the word "orju," which is an abbreviation. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Orju. Oh, okay. My limited grasp of Mandarin, Chungguo is Chinese, isn't it? Uzhou then is their abbreviation of the transliterated name Uliobazhu. Zhu means continent. A similar Chinese-derived term, Ushu, is also sometimes used in Japanese, such as are you keeping up? Such as in the Japanese name of the European Union. The Japanese call it the Oshu Rengo, despite the katakana Europa being more commonly used. In some Turkic languages, the original Persian name, Frangistan, land of the Franks. You see, we could be Frangistanis if we had gone with the Persian name for Europe. Isn't that amazing that my favorite Persian, Frank, from where his genes originate, they call the Europeans Frangistan. It took a long time to get to that, didn't it? But anyway, it's used casually in referring to much of Europe besides official names such as Avrupa and Evropa. Frangistan. We could, to this day, be Frangistan if certain paths in history had been taken. Then there's your map. I'm putting that bigger on the screen for you as I look to see. I need to raise my chair. Apparently, says Mrs. M. Is my camera dropped while I've been reading? Okay, I know it's Louisa. Is he at the children's table? Okay, I'm up now. Thank you for that, for the notes, Mrs. M. And people have fallen asleep, I think. So job done in some respects there. And I will read a further paragraph to delight you further on the origins of Europe and the background of Europe. Starting where I did, saying that to me, as I grew up, Europe was the blue flag with the yellow, or it became the blue flag with the yellow stars. So ubiquitous is the brainwashing, conditioning, propaganda, PR machinery of the EU, and I'm having to wipe my brain a little bit and wash it a little bit to come to a new understanding of what Europe really is. And that's what I'm sharing with you this evening. The big picture, Europe, our wonderful continent. Then, so last couple of paragraphs here to give you a bit more background on Europe. The prevalent definition of Europe as a geographical term has been in use since the mid-19th century. Europe is taken to be bounded by large bodies of water to the north, west, and south. Europe's limits to the east and northeast are usually taken to be the Ural Mountains, the Ural River, the Caspian Sea. To the south, these places just sound so great to me. They've been referred to, haven't they? You hear on the news sometimes, you hear it in the movies, you've heard it at school. The Caucasus Mountains, the Black Sea, and the waterways connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. Islands are generally grouped with the nearest continental landmass, hence Iceland is considered to be part of Europe, while the nearby island of Greenland. Did you know that Greenland is not part of Europe and is usually assigned to North America, although politically belonging to Denmark? Nevertheless, there are some exceptions based on socio-political and cultural differences. This is where it just about got interesting again. Cyprus also, you see on this map here, I'm looking at Cyprus in green, not geographically in Europe, but closely associated with the continent, similarly to Armenia, which I will highlight for you as well. Armenia there's your flag, and Greenland aforementioned there. Now, the blue countries here, Russia, Kazakhstan, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Turkey, are shown in blue, and they straddle the border between Europe and Asia. To me, that's fascinating. And there are places, some of those places I would like to go to. Islands are generally grouped then with the nearest continental landmass, and we've heard about Cyprus there, and Greenland. Malta was considered an island off northwest Africa for centuries, but now it is considered to be part of Europe as well. Europe is used specifically in British English, may also refer to continental Europe exclusively. So there you go. The term continent usually implies the physical geography of a large landmass completely or almost completely surrounded by water at its borders. And that's why it's a peninsula, isn't it? Strictly speaking, prior to the adoption of the current convention that includes mountain divides, the border between Europe and Asia has been redefined several times since its conception in classical antiquity, but always as a series of rivers, seas, and straits that were believed to extend an unknown distance east and north from the Mediterranean Sea without the inclusion of any mountain ranges. Cartographer. Now, isn't this an amazing job to have had? I don't know if it's still exciting being a cartographer. Isn't that what T-Duck used to do? Cartographer Hermann Moll suggested in 1715 Europe was bounded by a series of partly joined waterways directed towards the Turkish Straits and the Irtish River, draining into the upper part of the Ob River and the Arctic Ocean. In contrast, the present eastern boundary of Europe partially adheres to the Ural and Caucasus Mountains, which is somewhat arbitrary. Borders are always somewhat arbitrary, aren't they? And inconsistent compared to any clear-cut definition of the term continent. So let's face it, we've got a nice Atlantic boundary here, haven't we? The Celtic coast, the Celtic frontier is very obvious, isn't it? Facing out to the Atlantic. However, it gets a bit more murky where Eastern Europe meets the Middle East. And yeah, those countries over there, Russia, Kazakhstan, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. Very interesting over there and very different, I would say. The different in terms of, our perception and in terms, we're only going to find out by going there, aren't we? And finding out what it's like to sit in an Istanbul cafe. And I will be talking to Frank about that, I think, sometime soon, possibly even this Friday. The current division of Eurasia into two continents now reflects east-west cultural, linguistic, and ethnic differences, which vary on a spectrum rather than with a sharp dividing line. That's going to be always more interesting, isn't it? Instead of having a sharp dividing line, have a boundary, or maybe not even a boundary, but like Venn diagrams of cultural, linguistic, and ethnic differences. The geographic border between Europe and Asia does not follow any state boundaries and now only follows, that's interesting, only follows a few bodies of water. Turkey is generally considered a transcontinental country, I think, as Sue said, right? Divided entirely by water, while Russia, Kazakhstan are only partly divided by waterways. France, the Netherlands, Portugal, Spain, and the United Kingdom are also transcontinental, or more properly intercontinental, when oceans or large seas are involved. In that, their main land areas are in Europe, while their pockets of their territories, of course, are located on other continents, separated from Europe by large bodies of water. Spain, for example, has territories of the Mediterranean Sea, namely Ceuta and Melilla, which are parts of Africa and share a border with Morocco. And of course, Portugal has its Azores and Madeira. According to the current convention, Georgia and Azerbaijan are transcontinental countries where waterways have been completely replaced by mountains as a divide between continents. So, who is coming on the Eastern European coach trip? Have I whetted your appetite? Have I excited you about Europe being the continent and the peninsula more so than it is the EU project, and brought more romance, mystery, and myth to the conversation? I'll tell you a few more facts before we finish, because I've got to get my head down. We're up at 8:30 tomorrow for the return, the 2023 first show of 2023 of the Good Morning Portugal show. But population, as I said, around 745 million people, an area of just under 4 million square miles. It's the second biggest continent of the continents, and its population density And it's described as second. Is that second most dense continent? That's interesting. 72.9 per square kilometer. GDP, I imagine this is constantly changing. 33.62 trillion. Does that mean anything to anyone? Christians currently at 76.2%. Atheist, agnostic, non-religious, 18.3%. Those of Islamic persuasion, 4.9%, and others, 0.6%. That will be the Star Trek people, won't it? Klingons and so on in Europe. Countries, sovereign, 45 to 50. You see, the jury's still out, and that is a big bandwidth, isn't it? It could be 44, it could be as many as 50. And de facto countries, 2 to 6. Dependencies, I don't understand what any of that means. But of course, let's just touch on the languages of Europe. Most common first language is Russian. Isn't that interesting? The most common first language is probably Russian. Russian, German, French, Italian, English, Spanish, Polish, Ukrainian, Romanian, Dutch, Serbo-Croatian, and Turkish. The time zones, interestingly, range from -1 to +5. So our European phone in the morning can appeal to people who... I'm going to use the central, I think, or am I using the Western European time? Am I falling into my own trap there? But as I figured it, there would only be people possibly listening who would be only at most 2 hours ahead of us for the Europhone, which will launch tomorrow morning. Largest cities are Moscow, Paris, London, Istanbul, Madrid, St. Petersburg, Milan, Barcelona, Berlin, and Rome. So there you go, a little bit of an introduction to you about Europe this evening. How long has that not been on the screen? Doesn't matter. Okay, let's have a look. OLP, Asia, Africa, North America, South America, Antarctica, Europe, and Australia, 7 continents from largest to smallest. That's great info. Isn't that amazing? Europe, 6 out of 7, second biggest. That's right. As in, yes, Europe, 6th out of those 7, as in the not the smallest, but the second smallest. Chris, Happy New Year, mate. Love you. And here in Oregon, that's from me and Lee, Chris. I passed. I was in Nazaré. We went on the funicular. Have you seen our video, Chris, of us going up and down in the, not the funicular, the ascensor, the lift there in Nazaré? And I passed the restaurant whose name escapes me now that you always talk about. Well, you talk about a few restaurants in Nazaré, but I went certainly past one of them that you mentioned. Here in Oregon, it's 3:27 p.m., as in nearly 3:30 in the afternoon, so we aren't sleeping. Some of the rest of us will be, and the Global Nobles are here. Thank you, and everyone else who supports the show in the way that you do. Really appreciate you. Thank you, Global Nobles. Happy New Year to you as well. Buon anno nuovo, felice anno nuovo. What was the other one? Buon anno nuovo, felice anno nuovo, prospero anno nuovo, prosperous one. Same time zone here as Oregon, wide awake and raring to go. Dusk dog walk coming up after the show. And the Nazaré lift video was interesting. I'm glad you think so. Certainly more interesting than me reading through Wikipedia. Karen, thank you for being here as well this evening. Great to see you. And we'll call it a day there. What we'll do is we'll play the intro of the morning show just to whet your appetite for when we'll be back in about, well, how long from now? 9 hours time, I believe. So I shall see you then. And thank you for joining me on this warm up tonight. Thank you for all your technical notes. Oh, actually, for the Portugal Club, folks, we're talking about the what now after that comes after what next. No, I'm not. We're talking about the what next that comes after the what now. Get a grip. And if you want some more backstory on that, do go to our latest Gumper blog, which is me writing. Well, the title is How Many Expats Does It Take to Change a Light Bulb, which is a little bit misleading because what I meant to ask was how many steps does it take to have a successful migration? I think it's 3. They are what's what now, and what next. And I've written about them on the links that I have posted to the screen right now. France was my first dream. It is for so many ladies, it would appear. I wonder why. Some of our friends trying to get us to move to France. That's interesting. I'd love to have that conversation. How's it looking in percentage terms, OLP, Portugal versus France? And of course, all of the rest of Europe, as we've discovered tonight. So many wonderful places to move to. Okay. What else? What other delights have we got that I can tickle your fancy with? Oh, Mrs. M's forecast for 2023. Deep dive into her astrological look at the year ahead. Go check that out. Mrs. M, if she's still awake, we'll put a link to her forecast for 2023 in the year ahead. Yeah, and Jim, you can hear me and Jim talking about the what next after the what now. Met with Jim after I did my Porto paperwork last week. Jim is a fantastic fella, a legend in the facilitation and workshop world, resident of Porto now, and we'll be talking on the Portugal Club on Tuesday evening about his view of how to live an extraordinary, inspiring and transformational life here in Portugal as an expat. Can't wait. Always have a great time talking to Jim. What's this picture? I'm trying to figure out what it is. Oh, Cliff Richard's house is for sale. If you've got 5.9 million. And maybe a little bit extra for the wine cellar. I think that's maybe negotiable. He's partial to a bit of Mathias Rosé. Is he not? Not sure. But he's got his own vineyard, I think, as part of this at 5.9 million. As I understand it, not sure. But it's on the market. Check that story out as well in our news section. I've put a link to that. What else have we got? We've got Sex for Over 60s coming up. Bob and Viv have agreed as part of our suite of subjects that we cover in the Portugal Club: well-being, community, purpose, life and death, wealth, and of course, love and sex. Bob and Viv on the 16th, I believe it is. Yes, 16th of January will be joining us for Love and Sex for the over 60s, telling us about, well, I say they're going to be telling us about their experiences. I don't know how much detail they're going into, but I think it's going to be a fascinating and candid conversation with them, because that's an important part of life, is it not? Is love and affection, and a bit of the old "how's your father" as well. I don't know if that's what you call it in the United States, but I think you know what I'm talking about. There's my slide for the Ascensor de Nazaré. Look at that. 45 degrees pretty much. That vehicle, that rectangular glazed box will take you up and down the hill at 45 degrees. Fascinating journey that is. And there's a little video of us doing that from a couple of days ago. One last little message then. Here's Salida de Porto. That will have been rained on by now. This was a few weeks ago, but I captured that. Love. Well, going back to Sex Over 60, I guess. What's in it for me? Sand, if you do it over there at Salida de Porto. But this is the message I want to leave with you. Have a great 2023. It could well be a spicy one this year, could it not? You talk to those astrologers about it, and all sorts of funny things shaping up, fourth turnings, this, that, and the other. It's going to be an interesting year. I think it's important that we stick together as a community and stick around with like-minded, supportive, and loving, peaceful folk who live in the possibility of an incredible future for humanity and not a dismal one. Join us for that. Be part of that community for 2023 here on in, and join us in the morning and for our other streams like this one at various random times of the day and night. And we look forward to your company throughout 2023. And I sincerely wish you a very good one. You know where we are if you need us. And we look forward to your company throughout 2023, whether you are making your way to Portugal or you already live here. Regardless of what's going on in the dismal view of the media, it is up to us to live our best lives here in Portugal or anywhere in the world. So make it so. Enjoy the rest of your day. See you in the morning. Ciao for now.
In Portugal, there's a YouTube show full of fun facts you need to know. Carl rings the bell and the members show to the GMP morning show. Featured guests will come and they will blow your mind. The audience will do so in kind. The little vanity mixed with some insanity on the morning show with GMP.
Good morning, Portugal, and I'd like to welcome you to another fantastic day